Right. I'm going to get started here with a couple little introductions. My name is Catherine. Thank you for joining us on a sunny day in mid-July. I am impressed that you are here. And it looks pretty nice outside. Um, this is, if you haven't been to one of these before, one of our learning opportunities for council members and for residents in stratas that we manage. We want to make sure that people have the information that will help them make decisions and understand the parameters within which they're operating, either as a strata council member or as a resident of a community or an owner. If you have questions or suggestions for future topics that we haven't covered or that you'd like to see us cover again, please always reach out to me. You all have my email. My email is the one that went out to you with all of the introductions. So I'm happy to hear from you and to get those suggestions. We do take each one of them and consider how we can implement them going forward. This session it is being recorded, it is being recorded, and we will send everyone who is registered a link to the recording once it has been completed and processed. So I will send that your way. Feel free to share it. It will also be posted on our YouTube channel for people to review after the fact. If you do have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature, which should be there for you. And if you have any questions about that, I'm actually just taking a look here. I have a new computer, and so things have slightly shifted the way that they weren't before. But you should be able to chat with the Q&A function, and that will allow you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and then those questions will be reviewed at the end, and Christy and Cameron will go back and forth with those. Again, one more thing, this is a webinar, so no one can see or hear you. So you can eat, you can drink, you can be merry, whatever you would like. And if you do need us, rather than being able to speak up, you can always message me in the chat. So you can message me directly in the chat, and I can help you out with whatever you might need if there's some technical difficulties or something like that. I think that's everything that I get to go over. And so I'm going to hand it over to Christy Tambury, who's one of our managing brokers, one of our managers of the Strata team, and also a manager of many properties. So Manager Supreme, Christy.
Thank you, Catherine. So thank you all for attending today. We have Cameron Johnson from Parker Johnstone, not to be confused. He is the building envelope maintenance manager, and he's going to take us through some information today. I don't have an in-depth introduction because he's going to say a few things about himself, and we're going to jump right into it. So Cameron, over to you. And as Catherine has said, at the end of Cameron's presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. So over to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cameron. I am as has been said, I am the building envelope maintenance manager for Parker Johnston Roofing. By trade, I am a roofer. I've got almost 25 years of experience with roofings of just about every type that we experience here in North America. I started roofing in Quebec and Ontario back in the early 2000s and have been dealing with roofing of all West Coast types since 2010. I've been the envelope maintenance manager with Parker Johnston now for almost 8 years. And in that role, I deal with everything from repairs during the inclement weather season, maintenance through the rest of the year, and then any smaller projects of just about every roof type available regionally. So as a company and as an individual, we've got a fairly good understanding about what sorts of roofs that you are bound to have or have experience with as a strata member or as a unit owner or some other vested interest when it comes to all bits of your property. So today we're just doing a very, very quick little workshop. I'm just going to talk about the most common types of roofs that we're going to have out here on the West Coast, as well as the more common problems that we're bound to experience. And then I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to sort of mitigate those things you should look out for, decisions you should make, or at the very least have on your horizon for planning purposes. So The big question when it comes to all this is why should I even care? Roofing is a very, for lack of a better term, unsexy thing. It's not something that we think about at any given time, typically until it goes wrong. Yeah, roofing is something that operates in the background. It's a lot like a foundation on your home. You don't think about it unless it goes wrong. But ultimately, roofing is a fairly important component on your building, whether it's a single family residential unit right up to big multi-unit condo buildings. And the main reason is it keeps everything below you dry. It is a very, very functional portion of your asset. I find it second really only to the foundation. Foundation holds everything up. Roof keeps everything dry underneath. Everything else, in my mind, between those two things, is secondary when it comes to roofing and foundation. So we're going to talk about roofing primarily today. Though, if there are any specific questions about the remaining envelope, meaning the wall systems or the foundation waterproofing, please feel free to ask those questions toward the end, and I might be able to address a handful of them for you. But we're going to focus mostly on roofing today. So there are a number of types of roofs. Each different type of roof will have its own specific maintenance requirements or considerations that you're going to have to think about over the life expectancy or longevity of that system. Every roof type from flat to sloped and all the various subtypes of roof in there are going to have specific considerations. And it's important to know which ones there are because a lot of people will come into ownership of a building or residency at a building with a specific knowledge type for one set of roofing or one type of roofing and apply those principles, albeit with very good intentions, to the wrong roof system type, and you could accidentally put yourself on the back foot. So it's important to know what you have so that you can make informed decisions going forward. And that's something that we're going to try to cover today, at least in broad strokes, to sort of arm you with that sort of knowledge and information. So number one that we're going to talk about here are sloped roofs in general. You're going to be most familiar with these driving around any residential neighborhood. It's going to be very, very common on condo buildings. It's very common on structures across the board, and for obvious reasons. Sloped roofs are, as the name implies, sloped, so they can shed all sorts of weather and water off of them. They're typically described in ratios of X to 12. So 1 in 12, 2 in 12, 3 in 12. It's an expression of rise and run, and all that ratio is doing is describing how steep that roof is. You'll often see on a depreciation report or on a home inspection, the roofs will be described in that way because that will also help correlate to how long that roof is likely to last because it has certain stress factors that change as the roof gets steeper. So a 1 in 12 roof is effectively a flat roof. It's a very, very shallow. It's 1 inch of rise over 12 inches of run or 1 foot of rise over 12 foot of run. It's effectively flat as far as we're concerned in the roofing world. And if you were to put the wrong type of roof on that system, it's not going to end very well. 12-12, on the other hand, is 12 feet of rise for 12 feet of run, a 45-degree angle. It's quite a steep pitch, though they do get steeper than that. And traditionally, those types of roofs are going to last a little bit longer in certain environments because weather just doesn't have an opportunity to settle on them. As soon as the water hits it, it slides right off. A sloped roof can be covered or protected using a variety of different means. So we're going to talk about the most common ones found regionally. We can always get into the weeds about a near infinite number of roof system options that are available, but I'm going to try to focus on the ones that we see here on Vancouver Island or the Pacific Northwest in general. The first one here being architectural sheet metal roofing. You'll hear this called ASM, just means architectural sheet metal on a lot of reports. They are a manufactured pre-painted sheet metal panel. They normally run in continuous lengths from eave to ridge. They are known for longevity. This is just about the longest lasting readily available roof system that we use here on the island, and they're incredibly low maintenance. They do have some issues potentially with puncture resistance. So if you are an area with very large Doug fir trees, this might not be the number one choice. But outside of those really big potential branches that could come down and poke a hole in your roof, every other environment is almost perfectly suited for an architectural sheet metal roof. The main concern with maintenance on these will be the growth of algae and lichen because it can potentially undermine the quality of the finish, which is effectively the paint. The paint is the thing that's keeping the metal underneath from rusting. Most of these systems are going to be steel, though there are some systems that are aluminum or some alloys. But the vast majority will be steel, so it is important in order to maintain longevity to keep the finishes in good condition. The nice thing about these is if you are noticing corrosion or acute damage or wear in certain areas, they are readily cleaned and painted. You can basically match up a panel to its adjacent panels or pre-paint your whole roof. And it's actually a fairly easy thing to do. Most commercial paint suppliers have paint ready to go for this type of roofing panel, and it really doesn't cost much more than your standard paint. Metal roofs also come in tile form. So this is not an architectural panel. This is an actual stamped tile. These are more commonly in the alloy finishes as opposed to steel, though you can see them in steel as well. And they come in a variety of patterns. Because they aren't a continuous panel from eave to ridge, they are considered a little less robust than the linear full-length panels. And that's mainly because you'll have a lot more fastening points, a lot more areas of profile where if you're walking on them, you could damage them by kinking them or canning them a little bit. And as a result, they are a little bit more high maintenance. If you have a metal tile roof, it's generally recommended that nobody except for qualified roofing technicians walk on them. Or at the very least, if there's another trade that has to go up to service other rooftop equipment like HVAC, that they be accompanied by an actual roofer to at least show them where to stand. One very common repair action item we have on local metal tile roofs is going in and replacing individual tiles that have been significantly damaged in some cases by people walking on them improperly or inappropriately. Almost everybody regionally will have seen an asphalt shingle roof. This is by far at the residential end and even in some commercial applications going to be your most common form of sloped roofing system here in the region. This system is made up of individual shingle tiles. Each tile is made up of 2 asphalt saturated fiberglass mats. Now, before they're laminated together, each mat is coated in granules, and the granules are there to reflect heat and ultraviolet radiation, UV, from the system. Now, without granules, UV can be absorbed by the top layer of asphalt, and it'll eventually become compromised. It basically flashes off that asphalt, and at the end of the day, what it will do is result in a shingle that can't shed water anymore. The asphalt is your primary waterproofing component. And so without the granules, the shingle will start to absorb water and eventually the system fails. Once the asphalt is gone, the fiberglass matting becomes UV exposed, and then it becomes exceptionally brittle. And at that point, it doesn't take more than a stiff breeze or a little bit of structure movement to cause cracks, breaks, or pieces of shingle flying right off. But if they are maintained, if they're kept free of contaminant, free of growths or other factors that could reduce longevity, these systems are fairly robust, they're fairly reliable, and they're predictable. We typically see 20 to 25 years of fairly consistent longevity from this type of system, again, as long as they're maintained. And we're going to get into some of those factors for accelerated wear a little bit later as we go on. Wood shingles. So depending on what part of town you find yourself in, you might see more cedar or other wood shingle types. You'll usually see cedar. You're not going to see a lot of different other wood types used here, though if you move across Canada, you will see different woods being used. These are obviously just individual wood tiles, wood shingles, shake or shingle. We don't need to get into the difference between them today. But ultimately, these are just cut pieces of wood that are nailed with laps and ensuring that no gaps or cracks are being exposed by the courses above them. These days, these are a relatively niche market now. If you have a building with an existing cedar roof on there, chances are it's going to be a relatively high maintenance item for you, at least if you want to maintain its longevity. And if you want specific repairs to it, the shingles themselves, the cedar is becoming increasingly expensive to source. Traditionally, this type of roof was all sourced via old growth logging. As we all know, given the current news cycle, old growth logging is basically a dying thing here in British Columbia for a lot of good reasons. And we're getting into second and third growth. Unfortunately, those wood sources just don't make as good a quality roofing product as the older stuff did. So as a result, now we don't have a lot of access to wood shingles in general, and the quality has gone down quite a bit, but unfortunately the cost has remained quite high. So it is a bit of a niche market. It's relatively high maintenance given that it is an organic material, so it does require a lot of cleaning, a lot of maintenance, and a lot of care and monitoring year over year in order to maintain some level of longevity. But we are seeing that market diminish quite a bit. Most wood shingles that you're seeing now are being ultimately replaced either by asphalt fiberglass laminates or with a variety of other more modern roofing products. Speaking of one of the major replacements for wood shingles are a synthetic composite shingle. Most of these are going to be a plastic, effectively, construction, though some companies will use recycled rubber products, for example. There's a big product in Alberta that actually uses recycled tires to varying degrees of success. But most of the heritage or legacy standard products, which are designed to give you something like 50 years of longevity, are going to be a virgin polymer composite. Now, these products can be stamped to look almost identical to cedar, either a newly installed cedar with all the beautiful hues and browns and the warm colors you're used to, or something more like what we're seeing here, which is more of a weathered uniform cedar shake look, where it's gone quite gray. But you can also get them to look like slate. You can get them to look like various types of not just wood, but also stone product. They're incredibly durable and have excellent longevity. Most of these companies have not quite been around for the 50 years that they're purporting, though we do have a couple of companies that have been around for a little over 30 years. And of the systems that have been even moderately maintained, they look as if they were installed effectively yesterday. So the chances of these seeing or exceeding a 50-year projected life expectancy are quite high. Now, that being said, they are quite costly. They're going to be one of the few systems that will rival cedar roofs for cost. In some cases, this will be even a bit more expensive. But what you're getting is a very, very long-lasting, durable roof system that's also just about as highly fire-rated as possible, apart from sheet metal roofs. So if you live in an area where you have a lot of big trees and you're worried about fire, or your insurance is worried about fire, this is an excellent system to consider. And then we have slate tile, which of course, for anyone who's traveled around in Europe, is the gold standard out there. We don't see a lot of slate tile roofing here in British Columbia, mostly because of the application methods that are required for slate aren't too great mixed with the seismic considerations that we make here. In the few applications where we do have them, they are an absolutely excellent choice for longevity and for fire, of course. You can see these roofs lasting hundreds of years in some cases, and they're relatively low maintenance. They are a little bit brittle when it comes to impact. So again, large branches, not so much hail here in British Columbia, or at least our part of British Columbia, but if we ever did get a big hail event, these do have some tendencies for fracturing or cracking, but they are readily repaired in those instances. It's not that difficult to do. And what we typically recommend for people is if you do find yourself with a property with slate is go try to source yourself some spare material to keep on site. And that way, if you ever had to have a roofing contractor come and fix it, you've got the material there that will fit and will match and will be roughly of the same, hopefully the same vintage. Another consideration locally here is concrete tile roofing. Now, this is the actual concrete tile. There is an alternate, again, more found commonly in Europe, which is like terracotta tile. We don't see much terracotta tile here, but we do see a lot of concrete tile made to sort of look like the terracotta equivalent, installed in quite a few homes in some neighborhoods here, especially on the South Island. Cast concrete, profiled in many forms, and again, what you're seeing here is the most common form of it. Not a particularly common choice here on the island, and the main reason being is that it is a concrete product. And therefore, what you're relying on for waterproofing is not actually the concrete tile itself. These tiles are finished from the factory with a coating to reduce any kind of water absorption. So for the first few years of a brand new concrete tile roof, you are getting something that's keeping 99% plus of the weather out. But gradually over time, that finish will start to deteriorate, and the concrete tiles themselves will act as a bit of a natural sponge allowing a percentage of that moisture or water to wick through. And what you're ultimately relying on is the underlayment barrier underneath it. Traditionally speaking, in the 80s and early 90s, when a lot of these roofs were being put on, underlayment such as a polymer impregnated fiberglass, or in many cases cardboard backed underlayment was used. So think of like a coated resin cardboard stretched across the framing of the house. Wood straps would be installed, and then the concrete tiles would be installed on top. And what that ultimately means is if you get a lot of moisture ingress or water ingress from the tiles themselves now being unsealed, you're relying on a paper product below. Now, for a few years, that's totally fine. It is designed to deal with a little bit of water. But here in the Pacific Northwest, or the wet coast, as a lot of people like to call it, we are going to see those systems progressively become overwhelmed. One of the number one considerations for these tile roofs for homeowners who want to keep them for a long period of time is to actually do a targeted replacement of the underlayment in areas where they are seeing saturation, or complete redos in some cases. It's not going to be much cheaper than a complete re-roof, but you are still going to enjoy the look of your concrete tile, the heat transfer, the heat retention that you're going to get in the winter months, which is why concrete's so popular down south. And you're going to get a proper long-term barrier below them. But it is a consideration. If you are looking at a property or home with concrete tiles, you're going to have to inspect the condition and type of that underlayment material, because that's going to factor in how much that roof is going to cost you as far as maintenance and or repairs going forward. Now, the other end of the coin for roofing, and you're going to see an awful lot of them around the neighborhoods here, are flat roofs. More modern homes are being built with flat roofs, just because that's sort of in vogue right now. But you're going to see a lot of commercial or industrial structures using flat roofs. It is fairly common. Flat doesn't necessarily mean perfectly flat. According to the Roofing Contractors Association of British Columbia, anything under a 4 and 12, so if we remember from a little earlier on, 4 inches of rise for 12 inches of run, 4 and 12 or under, so 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, those are all technically considered flat roofs. 4 has always been the transition mark, so most shingle manufacturers will allow for a shingle installation down to 412, sometimes to 3, but generally speaking, right at 3 or a 3.9 or 4 is considered the transition from slope to flat. So you'll see a lot of flat roof systems that aren't quite flat, but they are generally considered flat. Here on the island and great parts of the lower mainland, SBS roofing, or torch-on as it's more commonly called, is going to be your most common flat roofing membrane. It's extremely reliable, it's rugged, it's easy to maintain and repair. It's a modular roofing system, so if certain areas have to be either repaired or replaced, the new membrane systems can be readily installed onto it and transition onto it via welding. Very, very reliable system, and it's very predictable. We have a lot of experience with it here in British Columbia. This system is basically made up, largely, of 2 layers of modified bituminous material that have been welded together to form a single homogeneous roof barrier. This is your basic breakdown of what a 2-ply SBS roof is going to be. Now you'll see as you're looking at that, it's unfortunately a bit more complicated than it needs to be. We can largely ignore the roof deck. This is more of a commercial application, but some buildings that you'll be dealing with, whether at work or living in, will have almost exactly this arrangement here. You'll normally have a roof deck of some kind, whether it's steel or wood, and then an insulative layer. Not all these buildings will have insulation in the attic. They'll often have insulation on top of the roof deck. And then some type of roof board. This is typically a 3x6 or a 4x8 sheet of fiberglass that's been asphalt impregnated. And it's going to be typically mechanically fastened through the insulation into the deck. And then you're going to have the first ply or the first layer of base sheet, and then a granulated cap sheet. The granulated cap sheet is there for the same reason as the granules on the asphalt shingles we were talking about earlier. Those granules are providing your primary defense against heat and ultraviolet radiation. There is an optional reflective coating that manufacturers will often offer as part of a 2-ply SBS roof system. They have varying degrees of success or popularity. We don't see too much of them here on the South Island, but we have dealt with them in the past. And those are typically there to encapsulate the two-ply system, kind of maintain its longevity a little bit better, and provide you some additional reflectivity, and thereby bringing your heat retention systems down. Most modern two-ply SBS roof suppliers will have a granule color that's pretty highly reflective on its own, but flood coating options are available from almost every manufacturing out there. And they are worth exploring, certainly in some buildings where heat for the top floor residents is a bit of a factor. Now, inverted roofs sounds a little confusing, but it's actually a fairly straightforward concept. We'll take whatever standard flat roof you want, and we'll put the insulation on top of the two-ply roof or on top of the other roof membrane, and then effectively just cover it up with landscape cloth and gravel. These are called PMRAs, Protected Roofing Membrane Assembly. And this is a way of maximizing the longevity of any roof system that you are bound to find. Roofs of all types are typically seen as the weathering portion of your building, right? So we think about, for example, the asphalt shingles or the metal panels we were talking about earlier, or a standard SBS two-ply roof system, torch on. It's always going to be the thing that sees all of the weather. And as it ages and weathers out in the environment, it will start to deteriorate, and that's what's going to dictate when that roof has to get replaced. A protected roofing membrane assembly is completely covered with insulation and aggregate ballast on top, which covers that roof system, encapsulates it, and completely shields it from all of that exposure. Once an inverted roof is installed, the only points of exposure are going to be things like drain points, sections of curbs that hold rooftop HVAC, ventilation, plumbing stacks, the like. Very, very small points of exposed contact, meaning that you can, in certain cases, reliably double the life expectancy of a roof system, because the environment the roof itself lives in is going to be pretty well consistent throughout the entire year. You can think of it like being the top floor of the living space within the building, home or structure that you're in. It's not going to experience the extreme highs and lows in temperature, and it's not going to experience frosting and the like, though it does see the water. The water from rain will ultimately get through the landscape cloth and the insulation and sit on the membrane to go down to the drains, but it won't see things like vegetation, it won't see things like birds, it won't see things like moss and algae, apart from those very small acute areas. They're incredibly easy to maintain as a result. This is typically the step where a lot of contractors will actually take the additional step if the roof is designed for the weight, and turn this inverted roof system into a green roof. So they'll actually encourage the growth of all types of organism and plant life, and that'll further increase the roof's resistance to thermal retention and keeping that structure below it as cool, or at least as consistent as it possibly can. This is an increasingly common and popular roof system for new builds these days. You'll hear construction term LEED construction quite a bit. This tends to be the system that they go for now. Flat roofs also come in a variety of single-ply membrane systems. Single-ply systems, by the name, is only one layer of roof membrane instead of, for example, two-ply SBS, which has more than one layer of roof onto it. The two most common that we see here are largely TPO and EPDM. Think of EPDM like an inner liner of a bicycle wheel. It is effectively a thick, durable rubber that has been UV treated, and it is laid across the roof in fairly large sheets, and it can be completely glued down or loose laid and then covered in a river rock ballast, which keeps everything in place. It's very popular in Europe, and it's increasing in popularity here in North America because of the ease of application. Mainly because, one, it's very quick to install. You don't need any real special tools. And more importantly, compared to torch-on, for example, there's no fire risk. This is a flameless application. There's no heat, no flame. It's chemically welded together with glues or otherwise being held down with gravel ballast. So you're not going to have any risk to the integrity of the building. It does carry some longevity issue when it comes to puncture resistance. Certain types of EPDM and thicknesses of EPDM are better than others for puncture resistance. But overall, it is a very long-lasting material. This system's been around for over 30 years, and we are seeing 30-plus-year-old EPDM roofs still performing very, very well. They're quite modular. They are easy to maintain, albeit they can be a bit messy. So if you have leaks, they are readily investigated and repaired, again, without any kind of torch or heat consideration for the building below, which is nice. They can be difficult to source leaks on, but there are some tricks that roofers have for that. The roof system, the white stuff on the left is TPO. You can think of this as effectively like a vinyl decking system, but roof grade. It's a little bit thicker, a little bit tougher, and it comes in a variety of materials across a whole spectrum. But typically you'll have TPO, which is more vinyl grade, or PVC. They're largely the same in terms of application. Again, they are largely glued down, just like EPDM, but instead of chemically welding the seams, these are heat welded, not with flame, but with heat guns. So think of just a really, really powerful hair dryer, and you'll actually weld those all together. They're still considered flameless applications, so they are not fire risk, though there is always a potential for risk because it is relatively high heat. Again, very popular in Europe, growing popularity in North America. Both of these systems you'll see more often than not on big box stores or large commercial applications. Again, because they go on very, very quickly, they're very easy to maintain, and they're very, very easy to diagnose and repair, generally speaking, if needed. BUR, or built-up roofing. You'll hear this called tar and gravel quite a bit. I wanted to start with this because the reason why it's called built-up roofing is because of these number of layers that you see here. You'll typically see as many as 9 or 10 plies of this roof, though they're not plies in the same sense as what we were just describing with the other roof types before. Built-up roofing, generally speaking, is going to have a layer of insulation on top of the roof deck. And again, the roof deck can be a number of materials. Once the insulation is installed, you'll see a fiberboard of some kind, typically installed. And then between the fiberboard and the first layer roof, you'll have hot asphalt. Roofers will just refer to it as hot, and it's a specific grade of asphalt that's used to be mopped down. Now, each time you mop down a layer of asphalt, you're going to impregnate into it a layer of asphaltic tar paper. And that tar paper is a generally speaking, organic felt that's been, again, impregnated with asphalt, and then we're going to further impregnate it or embed it into each layer of hot that's been applied. And you're going to do this for as many times as what is necessary for the pitch of the roof and the types of asphalt being used. Generally speaking, 3 or 4 plies are going to be on your flatter roofs. 5, 6s, and 7s are going to be on a little bit more of a slope. And then you'll have various application methods and offsets in order to accommodate that. But at the end of the day, you're going to put a last layer of hot on as a flood coat, and then you're going to embed gravel on top, hence the term tar and gravel. This was the gold standard worldwide for flat roofing for a very, very long time, like into the 19th century. It's been largely overtaken by SBS, by torch-on roofing, and that came down to just changes in manufacturing processes and availability for the type of asphalt that was left to the roofing industry. Ultimately speaking, roofing and roads are at the bottom of the oil hierarchy, we'll call it. So we all know how oil gets extracted and turned into a great number of products, from fuels to polymers and plastics and the like. And as those industries have expanded new types of polymers, the leftover ingredients have become of lesser and lesser general quality. And a decision was made about 30 years ago that the average quality of tar just wasn't really up to snuff for tar and gravel roofing anymore. And that's when they came up with torch-on roofing. They rubber modified it, stabilized it in rolls, and changed the application rates. There are different types of this BUR system still available, but it's not just with liquid tar like it used to be. We'll actually use a polymerized tar now. And there are a number of companies that offer those exact systems. The application rates are the same, but it's effectively a cross between liquid polymer plastic and asphalt together. It's very messy. It's not fun, but it will give you a very, very long-lasting roof. In certain cases, 30 to 40 years would be a base standard for a lot of those new application roof systems, and sometimes longer. Ultimately, this is what it looks like. It just looks like a nice, neat river rock or gravel roofline. Again, commonly called tar and gravel for that reason. It's an extremely heavy system depending on what type of buildup you have. But the nice thing is it doesn't have a massive amount of maintenance requirement. Generally speaking, for the first 15 years of a tar and gravel roof, you're keeping the big debris off, you're keeping a lot of the big moss or plant life off, and you're just double checking seams and penetration points. That's about it. As these systems age and enter their final phases of reliability, however, you will start to get some acute catastrophic failures if the system is right toward the end. Tar and gravel needs to expand and contract just like any other building material as they weather each season every year. And older tars especially have lost a lot of their malleability. So as the system becomes hot in the summer, it wants to relax and expand. And as we get into the first cold snaps of the fall, it wants to contract and shrink together. And what will end up happening is the shrinkage that's occurring will actually form cracks. It'll split along the seams of that asphaltic felt or tar paper that was installed at point of installation. And those cracks will go right from the roof line down to the roof deck, so effectively opening up a channel for water to get directly in. They are fairly easy to maintain and repair in those instances. We can find the leak areas fairly quickly, but as the roof ages, that cracking becomes much more aggressive and much more consistent, and that's usually time to replace that roof outright. It can get pretty complicated to be chasing cracks for a long time, and it's usually a lot more economical to just remove that roof and replace it with something more modern. Roof maintenance. So now that we've kind of talked about the general roof systems, the big question becomes, well, what do we do about this fairly expensive asset that we have right now? Every roof system type has a specific maintenance program or maintenance plan that's built into it from the manufacturer and from the original installers. And that's going to be there again to maximize its longevity. Maintenance type and frequency is going to depend on the roof type. So roof pitch, roof type, and where the roof is. A roof right in the middle of a great big field with nothing around it for a mile is probably going to need less maintenance overall than a roof that's right in the middle of a second growth forest with big Doug firs around it, constantly dropping needles and the like. Regardless of the roof system type, neglect will lead to reduced longevity. And that's just a general thing. You can think of a roof a lot like a car. If you don't ever touch up your brakes or change your oil, the car is probably not going to last 1,000,000 kilometers. So regular maintenance is something that's definitely going to be required. The number one consideration for, generally speaking, any granulated type of roof, so asphalt shingles, SBS, certain metal roofs actually have granules on them too. We don't see too much of it, but it is a consideration. Anything with a granule on it is very susceptible to moss growth. So you'll often refer to it or hear it referred to as MAL, moss, algae, and lichen. As MAL establishes, it physically roots into the granulated substrate, so the shingle or the membrane, and mechanically removes those granules. Now, during seasonal periods of dormancy, sections of that moss is going to recede and break away, and what it does is it leaves unprotected membrane below it exposed, whether it's the asphalt in something like an asphalt shingle or the bitumen in a torch-on roof. Either way, those materials are not UV rated and will become UV compromised if left unattended. In something like a wood substrate, for example, so cedar shingles, excess moss growth will actually create gaps and cavities in the grain of the wood and will allow further water ingress into the shingles, and that'll more quickly strip out things like the natural tannins in the wood, which helps also keep the wood from rotting, and it will ultimately lead to reduced longevity. Moss removal, well, let's back up slightly. Moss prevention is going to be your number one key. So if you have a relatively new roof system, regular treatment in line with manufacturer specifications is going to be your number one line of defense against all things moss. But with that said, if you have moss, you can treat it, but the list of do's is pretty short. The list of don'ts is what I really want to focus on, and there's two in particular. Number one is what you see this gentleman here with, and that's a pressure washer. You have a lot of contractors available in any city, especially here on the West Coast, though, where someone will offer to demoss your roof, and they're going to show up with a couple of big bristled brooms and a pressure washer, and they'll talk about, oh, it's low pressure and it's a special nozzle. I generally tell people if someone shows up to your demossing job with a pressure washer, you can very, very politely tell them to pack up and just leave now. Pressure washing is never recommended on just about any type of roof line. with the exception of metal. And even then, you have to be very careful because you don't want to damage the finish of the metal panel. Again, because the finish, the paint, and the clear coats and the like are what's keeping the metal panel from rusting and ultimately failing prematurely. The other one that we really need to talk about is the use of detergents. There's a couple of classic tales that are told about the application of, most famously, powdered Tide, because powdered Tide has a zinc content to it that will kill moss. Now, that's true. Powdered Tide will kill moss. It's an excellent moss killer. The problem is that all of these detergents are surfactants by nature. And you can think of a detergent or surfactant about what it does in your everyday use of it. So, for example, you use Tide to wash dishes, or sorry, wash laundry, or other surfactants to wash dishes. At the end of the day, what you're doing is ultimately degreasing your dishes because the grease is what's holding all the dirt and other matter you don't want on there. Your roof is effectively made of grease. It's an oil product. And if you degrease your roof, you are effectively stripping the oils that are essential to keeping the water out. So using any kind of a surfactant or degreaser is ultimately going to contribute to a reduced life expectancy. Now, in some cases, a single application is not going to necessarily harm the roof, but regular applications by certain contractors or homeowners can not just have the life of the roof, it can significantly reduce it further than that. As an example, years ago, I was on a strata, walked by watching a contractor sprinkle Tide on a roof that was only about 5 or 6 years old. 2 years later, they had to replace it because he was there twice a year doing it right from day one. They thought they were doing everything right, and that roof didn't hit the 10-year mark. And I think between the time it was installed to the time it was replaced, the bill had gone from, I think, $145,000 to over $250,000 just because of price increases and labor increases with shingles, given that it's a volatile market being an asphalt product. So it's important to consult the manufacturer's specifications. Almost everybody recommends only using a 50-50 mix of chlorinated bleach and water and then rinsing off after an hour and then repeating that step as necessary. Certain contractors will be sufficiently insured and bonded for their own proprietary solutions, so you have some safety there. But generally speaking, 50-50 bleach water is good for SBS roofs, EPDM roofs even is what they want, and then certainly asphalt shingles and cedar. Roof debris. We're getting into the easier stuff now. Debris on your roof at the end of the day is going to trap water, it's going to clog drains, and as it decomposes, it acidifies, and that extra acid load is going to contribute to granule loss, especially on granulated surfaces like torch-on or asphalt shingles. So regularly removing debris as needed is recommended. And I just say use a leaf blower that's relatively wide nozzled, and that way it's not going to cause any significant damage. Flat roofs, same thing. You're going to have a lot of accumulated debris. And again, this is something that should be done at the very least seasonally and more frequently if necessary. So, if you clean your gutters or your house in October and then a big November windstorm shows up a few weeks later and it looks like you didn't do anything with your roof, you should probably clean it again or get it cleaned again. That's kind of your basic maintenance points on your average roof, but now we're going to talk a little bit about common roof failures. These are the things that are ultimately going to result in water ingress, which is, at the end of the day, not the thing we want, but often the thing that rings up the alarm bell so that we suddenly start thinking about that roof that we haven't been keeping top of mind. One of the more common things we find that's a bit of an issue, especially these days, are ventilation concerns in general. There are a number of different ventilation concerns. What we're showing here is a disconnected duct to a utility vent. Commonly, washroom vents, kitchen vents, dryers. These are often routed through the attic space and either to an exterior wall or to a roof line. Now, this particular image is showing a polymer composite or otherwise plastic roof duct. That vent in there is completely made of plastic with a little wire in it. And over time, especially for things like dryers, that plastic wears out and these things just disconnect or fall off over time. Using the appropriate material is required. Most code is saying at the very least it has to be, if it's going to be a flex duct like what we're seeing here, has to be one of the more modern foil flex ducts or actual hard ducting, so rigid steel in most cases. You're also going to see requirements now for almost all of them being insulated, and that's to mitigate any humidity buildup in your attic or wall cavity. Generally speaking, if we're seeing a vent that's improperly connected at the roofline, when you're looking at it from below, you're actually going to see this staining. It's not always mold, though it often is. A lot of the time, it's just accumulated dirt and debris because the underside of the roof deck is becoming moist over time, and it just attracts all the dirt in the attic spaces. But you'll often see this, though it can be causes of a certain number of other things. The vent itself, not just the duct in the attic, but the vent on the roofline has to be properly installed. And in a lot of cases with additions or renovations, new vents have to be installed or retrofitted onto the existing roof. And you really want to make sure that whoever is doing that work is a qualified roofer and who's doing it properly. What we're seeing here is at some point years back, somebody was hired in to, I'm assuming, do a renovation on a home. They installed a new vent, and basically all they did is they just slapped this vent right on top and threw a bunch of caulking or mastic or sealant down with the hopes that that thing would last 20 years. And they just don't. This particular instance, we're seeing an old flange vent that's on the underside, and they almost never properly seal to the roof vent, regardless of type above it. And it just rots the roof deck above. OSB roof decks are more susceptible to it, but it's very, very important to ensure that the proper type of roof vent is being used, having been installed properly, and is being properly connected to the utility below. Ventilation in a roof line, whether flat or sloped, also has to be considered, just generally speaking. Your roof is effectively like the lungs of your home. Cold air or exterior ambient air is pulled in at the bottom eaves and is exhausted at the uppermost or highest points of the roof. If you're not finding proper ventilation or cavitation or a number of other factors, this is what you're going to see if you pop your head up into an attic, which is just widespread either dirt accumulation on the underside of the roof deck or mold mildew. And that's just because the roof in there is chronically too warm. It holds too much moisture, and that moisture is eventually going to settle on every organic substrate it can find. And it's typically going to hit the roof deck first, only because the roof deck is most susceptible to it, especially what we're seeing here, which is OSB, oriented strand board, which is very susceptible. It's most susceptible to moisture ingress. So regular checks, popping your head up into an attic. Generally speaking, excuse me, your attic should be roughly the same temperature as outside. So if it's -5 outside, your attic should be as close to that as possible. If it's +30, it should be +30, roughly speaking, in your attic. If it's much warmer than that in the summertime, it could be an issue. And certainly in the winter, if it's -5 outside and it's 10 degrees in your attic space, that's just a recipe for moisture, and you're likely going to see this. Improper nailing of shingles. We see this all the time as far as our maintenance and repairs. If the shingles themselves aren't nailed properly, or the shingles aren't spaced properly, you're going to get water soaking into every single nail point, and it's just going to rot the substrate below. This is a plywood roof deck, and ultimately these aren't just replacing the shingles. This is cutting out all of the old rotten plywood and reinstalling new stuff. So it can be quite costly. Flat roofs will often have blisters on them. Blisters are caused by trapped air. Not always a risk to the integrity of the roof, though they can be if they materialize on or right at seams or are very, very large. If you are worried about blisters on a flat roof that you have, call any reputable roofer. They're going to tell you if that blister is worth repairing or not. And the repairs themselves are generally pretty easily done. Granule loss, whether it's an asphalt shingle or a flat roof or any other type of system, this is what it's going to look like up close, especially when moss or lichen growth is the main culprit. So again, if you are allowing for a long-term growth of moss or other organic matter, this is what it's going to look like. And as more and more of that asphalt or bitumen becomes exposed, it's going to reduce system longevity. Sealant failure. A lot of penetrations or transitions or flashings are going to rely upon the use of sealant for weatherproofing. And sealant's kind of in a variety of types and longevities built in. Generally speaking, 5 to 10 years is what your life expectancy is going to be for most sealants. In this photo, what we're seeing here is mastic being used. Mastic is not UV rated and should probably have not been used for this type of application unless it's an emergency. Normally, we recommend removing. Here's another example of mastic being applied. It's excellent for, again, quick leak investigations, repairs on various roof systems. But again, it's not a long-term fix. It's generally just their diagnostic, as a diagnostic tool, stop the leak, and then at least buy some time for good weather, and then have someone come in and do a proper, typically a new patch of membrane or a different type of sealant. We do have some permanent sealant solutions, but it won't look like this. Chimneys are a big source of ingress and problem, especially brick chimneys. Those stucco and wood chimneys are also quite common. Generally, brick and stucco being, again, a rock product or similar to concrete, they are big sponges. So unless you are regularly sealing or otherwise painting your brick or stucco chimney, they will eventually start to absorb enough water that it will result in a leak below. Moss growth will contribute to that, and it will also contribute to the cracking and spalling that can potentially lead to direct water ingress. That'll just bypass the saturation problem. And here we just have a couple of infographic with just a couple of basic ways water gets in. So again, at the flashing transition lines with saturated bricks and decaying mortar is very common. The flashing caps up top, whether they're concrete or metal, transitions inside the home, and then ways that they ultimately materialize inside. So regular chimney maintenance, or at least observation, whether by a roofer or by qualified mason, is recommended. Skylights, everybody likes having additional natural light within their home. Skylights are considered sort of an accessory to a roof. They aren't directly tied into the roof structure apart from the skylight curb. And so they can be readily repaired or replaced, totally independent of the rest of the roof. They do require regular attention in order to monitor the condition of the seals and gaskets. This particular example is a failed case frame and a failed sealant between the panes of the skylight, as you can see with all the discoloration between the panes. Two most common skylights we see regionally here are acrylic domes, which is on the left, or a flat glass sealed unit on the right. Acrylic domes are fairly economical when compared to glass, but they aren't going to be sealed units. They're not going to have the same insulation value as a flat glass will. So if you have one of these over a bedroom, you are going to notice that you're going to experience wider temperature ranges throughout the day than the sealed glass units. You'll also notice in acrylic domes often condensation or discoloration between the panes. Again, it's because they aren't fully sealed. Whereas glass units are just like an exterior window in your home. It will be at least 2 panes, and it will be completely sealed or argon purged. You should regularly be inspecting and cleaning your skylights. Case frames on certain companies of skylights can be rebuilt. So certain companies, if you have a leaky unit and it's the case frame that's actually failing, you don't have to replace the unit. You can actually go, the roofer can go get the kit from the manufacturer, and it's quite a bit cheaper than a new skylight, and they just rebuild them. Opening mechanisms, if your skylight opens, those things can be serviced or replaced and updated on some units as needed. And then accessories can be mounted to the skylight curbs on certain units. So for example, solar shades or manual shades. Kind of the options are more or less endless these days. We'll skip through these last through fairly quickly for you, just in the instance of time here. So gutters, just like the rest of the roof, you have to be maintaining some level of clearance in your gutters in order to accept all the water that's coming off your roof. And these large debris buildups will actually not just prevent the gutter from properly draining, it could push a lot of that debris into the downspouts and into your perimeter drains. And if those things get clogged, it's a fairly large bill to have someone like Roto-Rooter come out and clear it. And in certain extreme instances can back water up, depending on the overhang of your roof, back into your house through the roof. And that could cause a roof leak. Drains should be regularly cleared, especially on flat roofs, which is a huge consideration for them, because those roofs can just start filling up with water. And if the flat roof is not installed properly, you don't have a bathtub anymore, you have a sieve, and it's just going to let the water straight into your home. Not all standing water is from obstructed drains. We do have a lot of structure settling regionally, so ultimately as the building gets older, the structure settles and the drains kind of become the high points. As the roof system ages, you can re-slope the roof when it's time for a new roof, or add drains into those new areas. There are some ways around that. Birds, we'll very quickly touch on this. Birds are not friendly to your roof. Birds are cute sometimes, but they are very problematic. Nesting activities will increase your organic debris load, and their waste, their poop, is pretty caustic. And everywhere that they decide to create some waste, you're going to see physical damage to the roof itself, and almost every type of roof. There are no exceptions. Woodpeckers are also famous for literally burrowing holes in roof membranes or roof accessories. Here on the left, we're seeing the areas of acute damage from bird waste. Those little kind of donut-shaped, very distinct patterns of damage is from bird waste. And those areas will potentially result in failure if you don't pay attention to them. And on the right here, we just have an extreme example of an area that's just only started to be cleaned from nesting and effectively an area where birds have been living. It's not pleasant, and it will absolutely reduce longevity. And you can just see they can take what is otherwise a nice, beautiful roof and just make it horrifying to look at and deal with if there's a problem. There are a number of deterrent systems available out there for mitigating their presence, and they will ultimately reduce the potential damage costs down the road. And they can be maintained and modified over time, depending on birds' reaction to them. Birds are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, and they are relentless. They're out there 24 hours a day, so they'll eventually figure out the fake owl you put there is not a real owl. So just as some examples, we have kites that are often installed, bird spikes which prevent nesting, and in some extreme cases, whole sections of flat roof especially can be netted off. And that's basically it there. We're very going to quickly talk about a couple extreme failures just because I know people do like extreme failures. We'll just quickly go through these. Sections of roof will blow right off in extreme winds. So this happened in Victoria a couple of years ago. This is down in Oak Bay, and about 2,000 square feet of flat roofing just completely blew off right on the water. Not the great way to wake up in the morning. This is in Anchorage, Alaska in 2024 from snow load. These buildings were built properly, but the extreme weight of that roof collapsed it. And I bring this up because a lot of people think, hey, that's Alaska. Why am I thinking about that here in Victoria? Here's the winter of 1996. And there's an awful lot of snow on that roof. Luckily, we don't see this a lot, but it is something to bear in mind. This is a fairly extreme acute case of saturation damage on a roof deck. We see whole sections of roof like this sometimes. This is up in Sydney back in 2021. Now, this is a bit of a personal note for me. We don't see tornadoes here, but we do have fairly high winds given that we're an island on the ocean. This is a bit of tornado damage just outside of Ottawa, Ontario. This is right next to my hometown. That's next to the high school I went to. And that damage happened in about 25 minutes. So you see there's quite a bit of roofing completely stripped off, and that was less than half an hour of wind exposure. So it is a bit of an extreme instance, but it's there. And then on flat roofs, this is a big box store in Langford. I'm not going to name which one. This is one I got called to at about 10 p.m. And I was not happy about it because no one else would pick up the phone. The picture on the right is the roof hatch with all the slush and snow that we had gotten that night. And the next morning, we had to clear everything off. This is a TPO roof, just as a reference. To give you an idea of how easily water can get in and find new ways in, these are little examples of every single area identified where water was getting in. And you see how small those areas are. Those are 3 out of about the 15 that we found that all had to get patched ultimately. And that nearly shut the store down, which is not good in big commercial applications. So it's very important pre-seasonal change, so in typically end of summer, early fall, to have a good roof inspection done and maintenance done as well in order to identify areas like this and hopefully address all of them before the inclement weather shifts. And with that, that's everything I had. So I'll leave it to the good folks at Proline there to take whatever questions you might have.
Awesome. Thank you, Cameron. We do have a question. What about some chemicals used to remove mold, and specifically like spray and forget?
Okay, yeah. So if you read the ingredients list on a lot of the commercially available moss and algae removing products out there, most of them are actually detergent based. Now, if you follow the mixture directions on those to the letter, the detergents or the surfactants are sufficiently diluted to not cause a problem. With that said, you have to follow those absolutely to the letter, and I generally don't recommend using them at all if possible, only because according to the letter of the warranty from your roof manufacturer, it will void your warranty. They only want 50-50 mix of chlorinated bleach and water. Now, if you are absolutely desperate to not use that, the one I will recommend, and I'm not going to give you necessarily a product name, but a type to look out for. And that's going to be any moss removal product that is based on hydrogen peroxide. Now, I don't recommend going to the dollar store and buying a bunch of hydrogen peroxide to put on your roof, but if you look at the ingredients list and see peroxide as the active ingredient, it will not only be environmentally friendly, it will be minimally caustic to your roof, and it will be fairly effective as far as removing the moss, algae, and lichen growth.
Great. And in terms of moss assessment, how do you determine when it's time for treatment?
Anytime there's any moss at all. Generally speaking, if you follow the letter of what your manufacturer wants, who made your shingle or made your flat roof membrane, they want you to have regular applications of a moss mitigant in accordance with their recommendations right from date of installation. And that's going to determine the frequency of it just depending on the environment. But they want you to prevent the moss from growing to begin with. And then anytime you see moss, they just want you to start ramping up those activities in order to, at the very least, prevent additional growth. A tiny bit's not going to hurt everything, but if it's allowed to multiply year over year, that's what's going to result in problems with your roof.
Awesome. Thank you. So in light of the time and the fact that we've gotten through all the Q&As, I'm going to throw it to Catherine. I think she's got some closing comments.
Hi, that was great. Can you hear me? Yeah, good. I really enjoyed that. Thanks, Cameron. And thank you to everybody who is here. And that was great to see you all come and to have your questions. Again, in case you forgot, it is recorded and I will send out that link and it will be on YouTube. Feel free to share that link with other council members or people who have roofs. I mean, it's a pretty small pool, but go ahead. It will, like I said, be posted to our YouTube channel. If you have future questions or comments, please send them my way. You have all my contact details. Always happy to hear any comments or questions. There's a survey also when you close this. So please, it's 2 questions long. Would love to get that feedback as well. And that is everything. So have a wonderful day. Enjoy that beautiful sunshine. Happy summertime. And we will talk to you all again soon. Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you.